We want everyone to just continue to pay attention and watching these trends as they shape how dealers go to market and how lenders provide access to credit, particularly with some of the hot items that are coming about in the market today. Hello there and greetings. I am Keishawn Batts, one of the hosts of the Leadership and Dealership podcast. And today I will be doing a solo cast as Don is not with us today. But one of the things that I'm really excited about today is just to share about the amazing time Don and myself had with Boots on the Ground in Las Vegas early in October. These two events that Don and I got to attend are the Auto Finance Summit and the Digital Dealer Summit, two pivotal conferences as a part of the automotive industry that happen annually. And one of the things I'm really hoping to share is just what are some of the instances that came from the conference? What are some of the key themes and maybe some of the really important sessions? I think as we think about the year coming to an end, it's been a very wild and interesting news cycle for the automotive industry. And I think some of that was really brought out during the conference. I'd be remiss to not mention those that were impacted by the two hurricanes in Florida and the Eastern Seaboard. And though will be a time of celebration and discussing all the activities in Las Vegas, really want to give special thoughts and prayers to those that were affected and impacted by the hurricanes. So generally, what we're going to do today is give a brief summary and acknowledging high-level insights, because there's a lot going on in automotive right now, whether it be strikes, whether it be interest rates coming down, credit constriction, a variety of different things are impacting everyone that's involved in the automotive industry. But first, we're going to start off with the digital dealer recap. And really, as you think about digital dealer, for those of you that have not had the opportunity to join, it's dealerships, dealer groups, vendors, partners all across the automotive industry that come together to really think about the technology that is ahead for the future, how dealers can improve their digital footprint, both online and in their dealerships. And it's a fascinating event because you get to see so much of this dealer group in Seattle and something really cool that they're doing, or a dealer group that's in West Virginia that's really come on board with something really exciting from a technical perspective. And it's just a time for the subject matter experts to come together and share their visibility into the market. So as we think about digital dealer, I wanted to share just a perspective that we had in our time together and really just touch base on four really big bullet points. One is the F&I experience hasn't really gotten to the place that I think many of us need it to be in the current environment. Yes, we've got a lot more dealers with online websites, enhanced VDPs, efficient leads going to the dealership, preparing dealers with new in-store tools. But one of the gaps that seems to be really paramount coming out of the digital dealer recap is that there's largely not much change in the F&I experience. Many times, traditional dealerships do an amazing job of shortening the process from the lot to in-store, but you still have that process of having to go to a finance manager's office. And oftentimes you have maybe one or two finance managers. And on a busy Saturday or a busy holiday, that still leaves customers spending 3 hours in the dealership just waiting in the queue to get to a dealer. And I think most of us believe that dealerships don't want to keep you in a dealership forever. They want to get you in and out just as quickly as you do. But oftentimes they don't have the tools or the resources to really do that. I think one of the really interesting things is that though there's been an amazing amount of investment in digitizing the dealerships, there hasn't been a ton invested in an F&I experience. Largely the proponents that have had the tools in F&I offices for the past 20 years, Dealer Tracker and Route One, have also made pretty huge strides, but still that process to get a customer into a dealer and getting into the finance office after shopping lenders, looking at different ancillary products, accessories, you name it, still seems to be a challenge. And in that same office, there's another big challenge for the F&I manager, and that's largely access to credit. With a lot of the different volatility that's in the market with higher interest rates, used car values coming down, delinquencies rising just a bit, charge-offs rising just a bit, lenders are still pretty tight with their credit. And that obviously creates, again, as the first point, F&I experience is being challenging. That still keeps customers in the dealership a little bit longer than they would like, whether it be because the finance manager needs to shop and find offers, call and rehash, or whether it's the customer still having to come in and provide steps or proof of this or proof of that, a lot of the challenges still remain despite a lot of the advancements in technology. The other things that we really notice is like customers are delighted the majority of the time in online shopping. And disruptors that you think of, like a Carvana or CarMax, that are creating those really delightful experiences, are pushing the demand for online sales, but the consumer interest isn't quite there on a consistent basis. Consumers are actually really interested in it, but it's not stopping them from going to a traditional dealer and going in. Really, as we think about Carvana and CarMax pushing the envelope on online sales, is really because of their footprint. They've got footprints across the nation. They've got vendors that can travel and bring vehicles straight to your home. Well, the traditional dealer still does a lot of local advertising and a local access from a logistics standpoint. So though online sales probably isn't where many of us thought it would be 5 or 10 years ago, it is certainly a growing opportunity for dealerships. And the big players, Carvana and CarMax specifically, have really done a great job of positioning itself for the future. And as we continue to think about service at a dealership, how dealerships communicate with customers, or the expectation that customers have, there's continued to be a huge investment in fixed ops, service aisles, parts, and things of that nature. And as you think about those experiences, those are going to be pivotal, right? A lot of the profit that happens in the dealerships happens in those parts of the business. So we notice at the digital dealer a large investment in AI driven solutions for service and parts. One of the things that's really cool for me personally, I know that I don't go too often without forgetting about having my vehicle service. The manufacturer that I have, as well as a local dealership, I believe has some AI tools that they use that really tell me like, hey, we estimate that you've driven X amount of miles since your last visit. Maybe you need to come in for a tire repair, or just a variety of different things that they provide that give real insights to my driving experience and how I've driven or used my vehicle in the past, where they send those automated messages. So I think that's going to be really pivotal as you think about the digitization of a dealership, not just in the sales aisle, but in the service lanes as well, and how we can improve that. And I think some of the things that come out of Digital Dealer are really impactful for how we next move on to the Auto Finance Summit, right? Experiences in the F&I offices are still a little troubling. Lenders Finance Summit are having challenges as they think about tightening or loosening credit in this very volatile environment, and the emphasis on online sales and how that could potentially impact customers as a whole. But again, before we jump into the Auto Finance Summit, again, just want to reemphasize that Digital Dealer was full of energy. I think it was a pretty jam-packed floor, other than a one time when a fire alarm went off and everyone had to leave. Maybe not 100% of the attendees came back after the fire drill, but it was certainly a lot of energy and a lot of excitement. Now, let's transition to the Auto Finance Summit. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Auto Finance Summit, kind of the same vein, but a little different attendee at the Auto Finance Summit than Digital Dealer. Auto Finance Summit really focuses on the lenders, right? The banks, your credit unions, your institutional investors, and they come together to really share the subject matter expertise of what's going on in their business, what's going on in the macro environment, and what to look forward to in 2025 and years to come. And as we think about the macroeconomic environment and the uncertainty, how they are thinking of different business practices or changes for the months, quarters, and years to come. You know, and one of the things that was really fascinating to me is this is probably my ninth consecutive Auto Finance Summit. And this was the first time there was ambiguity around electric vehicles, right? And it's not to say that there was any negativity around electric vehicles, but for years upon years, the lenders, the OEMs, the captives have all been there talking about the emergence of electric vehicles and how it was going to dominate the space. I even recall, I looked at some of my notes, there was a conference in 2019 that said electric vehicles would be 35% of the market by 2025. I don't think we're quite there yet, but one of the really interesting things that was spoken about at the Auto Finance Summit with captives and some of the OEMs and banks was just that it's kind of plateaued in a variety of different senses, whether that be because of customer demand, supply issues, you name it. But it seems to have plateaued a bit where that initial up and to the right approach hasn't really delivered. And you often heard some OEMs talk about reassessing their strategy. Some OEMs had a commitment of having an entire fleet of electric vehicles by 2025. That seems to have dampened a bit. And a little of the ambiguity around EV credits seems to be pretty large as well. So that was a really large topic during the Auto Finance Summit. Another thing that was really fascinating was the leasing market. Leasing has come back with ferocity in the market over the last 6 to 7 months. And that has had a huge impact on residual values. As you think about the used car market and the values tending to depreciate since August, in September and October, and like just the overall intensity of leasing, residual value risk, et cetera. There were some executives that sat on the stage that talked about how they felt about residual value risk and their ability to navigate that for electric vehicles, for ICE vehicles, you name it. And as you continue to ponder about where the industry is headed, leasing taking off kind of tells you there's going to be a large amount of used cars that are going to come into the market the next 2 to 3 years. How does that continue to affect used car values? That remains to be seen. But as we look at inventory levels kind of resettling down and getting back to a sense of normalcy, you also have to consider with the emergence of leasing, and one of the OEMs quoted that 80% of their new cars are leased, just how that will impact future residual values and used car values as those vehicles come into market. And it wouldn't be the Auto Finance Summit if there were not strong opinions from the lenders about credit. And as I mentioned a minute ago, with the finance managers feeling the tightening of credit, the lenders spoke about that as well, largely about customers' fluctuation and ability to repay, how they are thinking about ability to repay. And that comes from a variety of different things, whether it be still a COVID hangover and people's adjustment of their abilities to repay, increased interest rates, increased dollar amount of vehicles, increased terms and lower used car vehicles. Like all of these things have come into play when you think about access to credit. And one of the really fascinating things is there was a panel with leaders from very different walks of life in the automotive industry. And they talked about unique ways that they're using data to inform their credit risk decisions, whether that be more access to open banking and having the ability to see a applicant's transaction history, both in deposits and debits and credits, or how they were looking at someone that was paid in cash and their ability to repay based on checks or job history or things of that nature. Really having a more diverse look at customers' ability to repay was a large portion of the discussion that was had. And as you think about in general terms, the automotive industry, though many say hasn't changed much in the last X amount of years, is changing often, at least in these last few years since the pandemic. And credit is obviously vital to that. As we mentioned from the digital dealer, they're having some pains with getting credit accessible, and the lenders being really curious about how they move forward in the coming months, quarters, and years. And again, as you think about those three highlights from both auto finance and digital dealer, one of the things that is really important is like the synergies between both of those conferences. You've got the digital dealer looking for the best and most efficient ways to get customers on the road in new cars. And you've got the lenders thinking of doing the same, right? They want to grow their portfolios, but they want to do it in a mindful, strategic, and smart way to ensure the safety and soundness of their portfolios. So as a whole, the trends in the automotive industry continue to change and continue to evolve with customer demand, lender demand, and just overall connections and synergies between those two personas. But I think one of the big things that I'm really excited about, that there was not a doom and gloom approach about the years ahead and the months ahead, because both conferences showed a lot of positivity and optimism about their ability to navigate and pivot whatever is to come as a community, and working with both the vendors at the Digital Dealer Conference or the Auto Finance Summit, where you have lenders, banks, and dealers figuring out unique ways to provide more access to credit. So as we think about, in conclusion, the Vegas experience is always great. Like if you just drive on the north side or the south side of the strip, there are lights and there's huge energy and optimism at every corner. And that was very consistent with how the automotive industry showed up in Vegas, really diving into the opportunities and the challenges and really focused on behaviors to improve that enhancement for the end consumer in both how they buy their car and how they finance their car. And again, we want everyone to just continue to pay attention and watching these trends as they shape how dealers go to market and how lenders provide access to credit, particularly with some of the hot items that are coming about in the market today. Interest rates seem to be being lowered recently and will continue to do so. How does that impact how customers show up? How does that impact how lenders provide access to credit? But again, amazing week in Las Vegas. I hope there was something that you were able to take away from this. And if you haven't been able to attend the Digital Dealer Conference or the Auto Finance Summit and you're in the automotive industry, I would certainly recommend it. It is full of knowledge share, business acumen, and it's just a great opportunity to network and empathize with your peers and partners across the industry. So that concludes this episode of Leadership in the Dealership, and we look forward to seeing you all next time.